Do short theme song intro. Again, I got into American politics like TYT and stuff back during the election of Trump. And again, that's when I became more aware that I don't know what's happening here. Um, and, it was just so nice to actually see people get emotional about the things that they were talking about, as opposed to just seeing these glassy news reporters talking about there's an issue. But then you learn later on that you're not learning about all the issues. Like, it's so insidious almost how much our media favors our government here, because something that somebody on Twitter pointed out, and as soon as they pointed it out, I can't stop seeing it. Whenever Justin Trudeau does something bad or there's a bad policy coming out of the government, they refer to it as Ottawa. So this policy came out from Ottawa, or Ottawa has done blank. But whenever it's something good, they name him by name. And it's just
Hmm.
those subtle little things, like they're trying to separate him from the negative. And they do something very similar with the NDP that I've noticed, that when the NDP have pushed forward, like the only reason why we got that $2,000 was pressure from the NDP, and yet the media gives all the credit to the Liberals. And if there's another positive policy that gets pushed through, it's like, oh, look at what's passed. But they never reference the fact that it was the NDP that did that. And yet, if there was something even vaguely wrong by the NDP, of course they get named. And it's just those subtle little things that just lead people to believe so many things. Like, we have Trump supporters up here, but then we also have what we call the true anon, as in Trudeau anonymous, because they're just so in love with him
Oh
and
my.
so blinded by him that, again, I am just screaming to people right now, he is never going to launch an investigation in the schools, because his daddy was prime minister when about, I did the math, like I actually counted it out. When he started, there were still 59 schools open. And you can't tell
Yeah,
me.
there's a. I was just gonna say there's a parallel between like you get all of the liberal woke behavior of Barack Obama
Mhm.
with the political dynasty of George W. Bush. So you just literally have like the worst of both worlds, honestly, there.
Mhm.
Because yeah, there's a bunch of things I was a little bit too young to remember, but I know there's a lot of foreign policy things that George W. Bush would not touch because that was HW territory, and he was very much like, I'm gonna protect my daddy, kind of
Mhm.
about it. And so like it's that was always a touchy thing. But with Trudeau, it's just sort of like that was something I noticed here because in American media, that was so much talk about look at Trudeau, he's this figure and he stands in such contrast to Trump as being like younger and metrosexual and like conventionally attractive and having
Better
like
hair.
all these qualities having nothing to do with policy. Yeah, like able like does all these performative things where like I mean not performative, like it's important to like have gender parity or equality in your cabinet, right? But like what are you doing for like what are you doing for people who don't have cameras on them all the time? It's kind of like a bottom denominator thing I get with a lot of these uh, capital L liberal politicians. I always give Canada the benefit of with your parliamentary system, you at least like the media is forced to make some distinction between your parties and your coalitions, and so the leftist one does get more attention. But like in America, anytime it's mentioned where like you get the $15 minimum wage, no one mentions that it was Bernie Sanders like rhetorically hitting Amazon over the head with a stick all summer a couple of years ago, and then
Mhm.
Amazon decided to raise their wage to $15 an hour, and then a bunch of other cities and states and companies started to do it on their own if localities weren't doing it because they were like, oh shit, if we do like a buck or $2 more than the competitors, more people will work for us. And so like
Mhm.
in our media though, because Bernie Sanders is a representative of the Democratic Party, when you want to like make him out to be an enemy, he's a socialist, he's different from the Democratic Party, he's an outsider. But when he did an achievement, a thing people love, which is tangibly making people's like through using the bully pulpit of his like persona or political power, like making uh companies raise their minimum wage, or even like pushing Trump and the Democrats to include to get our stimulus checks up in the fall of last year, they would have been nothing. They Bernie wanted 2,000, so they end up being this lie of being 600 under Trump and then 1,400 under Biden. There's supposed to be 2,000 under Biden, but whatever, progressives. That was all Bernie's thing to get it to be even some kind of doable number that even people can play around with. But that credit never, ever, ever goes to Bernie, because you can't admit in the mainstream media that someone who avowedly, proudly says they are a democratic socialist is right. You can't admit that more than the people already get that, because I'll never forget watching Bernie Sanders do a solo, he was the only person there, town hall in the middle of a shark pit on Fox News in Philadelphia. And he got the crowd to boo the hosts and cheer him because he was talking about healthcare. He was talking about class justice in the context of racial justice as well, slightly, because he had gotten better about that in 2020. And so the people, regular people, can be reached out to. Even some of like the Fox viewing drones can be reached out to. But it involves a rhetoric that is also antagonistic to existing forms of power in the United States. So it never goes through. But at least institutionally with a parliament, like, even though it's always the enemy, at least the NPD is like mentioned there as like a thing.
It's complicated up here because, again, and so many Canadians, they don't know how this works. Because we do run into the problem, especially when the Conservatives get into power, is sometimes you only need 35% of the popular vote to have 100% of the votes. And so when the Conservatives get into power with 35%, they have 100% control over the rest of the country. And there's very little that can be done. And the NDP is the most leftist group right now, but it depends on who you talk to in the NDP, because the premier of BC right now is NDP, but he's gone hard center. And that's causing a lot of strife. And then any negativity reflected against any NDP, regardless if they're provincial or federal, it translates. And it's so frustrating. There's a lot of infighting within the NDP to try to push things more progressive or more left. Because quite often, especially near an election, as I say, Canada only ever has two main parties. Because when it's not election season, the Liberals and Conservatives line up on almost everything. And then when it is election season, the Liberals and NDP line up on almost everything, because the NDP will start going more center in hope of getting more votes. And then the Liberals make all these progressive promises that they never follow through on. But right now, at least there's people within the NDP calling on, we need to get the international courts involved. We can't let this injustice keep on going. We have to do a full search. And I'm going to be doing a video about the whole story at some point to give them all the information, because, again, you have to read like 20 different articles in order to get the full picture of one story, because of how the media will pick and choose what they take from it. And it's just so frustrating, because most Canadians didn't even know that there was recently a vote on pharmacare. They don't know that even happened, because we're so unplugged to what's happening here. Most Canadians know far more about what's happening in the States. We have Trump supporters here. Like, that's how much of an influence.
Which is both like wild and scary to me.
Yeah.
Like,
we regularly.
What do they want? Do they want like Trump to? They want Trump to be a president of the United States again, so he can annex Canada, and then like they get to be like Trump, like American citizens. Like, what's the end goal for them?
Yeah, I don't know, but there's anti-mask parades still going on because COVID is still rampant here. Because most people are just starting to get their first shots, which doesn't help, and so people aren't even paying attention to that. But we have our anti-mask parades going on, and without a doubt you will see Trump supporters within these parades, Canadians with Trump stickers or flags and stuff. And of course the police will just calmly escort them down the street, whereas if they're getting rid of a encampment of houseless people, they are violent. Shocking how they do that, and they wear their little thin blue line badges while they do it. I don't know if you guys have the same thin blue line thing going on. I know you have the same issues with police, but if it's the same symbol.
Yeah, we have the exact same, like, I mean, I doubt it's the same symbol, because ours is the American flag and one of the stripes is blue and the rest of it is black.
Okay, that's
I don't
pretty
know what it
much,
looks like in
yeah,
Canada.
it's pretty much the same, only with Canadian flag, where it's kind of like diffuse colors, so it's not really red, but then you have the blue stripe going across it.
Is it like the blue taking the place of the white stripe?
No, it just goes horizontally across the middle.
So it's just like no. And how do I need to like picture the Canadian flag in my. Yeah, the Canadian flag has so it's just like a complete disregard for how the flag looks altogether.
Yeah,
Okay, fine, fine.
yeah. It's not like they put little
I'm
bars
not
on the
gonna
side.
apply logic to these. I'm not gonna apply logic to these people. I'm just gonna like
Yeah, it's
they just want to be American. I mean, like they're not want to be Americans. They just like have nothing better to do on the internet, and they're just like LARPing essentially. But it's like
yeah.
way more serious, and I think they realize it. It sucks.